Hi, welcome to a book review for Girl, Woman, Other. What can I say? Book, this book is a bit upside down because the camera is on me like this. This book it's just the most, and can I just say this author of this book is so well written. I could not believe each section. So the book is split, it all connects together. It's split into several chapters. It's split into 5 different chapters, and we get to explore each character. The characters don't all necessarily know each other, but somehow they seem to have connected towards the end of the book, so we know who is connected to whom. But that's not even that important, connecting the characters together, except Penelope and Hattie and Harriet. Penelope and Harriet, who we later found out that they are related. And if you haven't read the book, I don't want to ruin it for you. The reason I want to do a review on this book, because I think it's such an important book for Black women. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Black and mixed race women of Black African descent, I think is important. Not just the British Black women across board. And I'm going to put the emphasis on the British Black women because we are a combination of Caribbean descent and African descent. And with that comes a lot of restriction in being part of the Western community or society, or growing up and being born in the Western countries or growing up in the Western countries from young, and adapting all of these different ways of being and creating a subculture almost. So we're not entirely traditional women in the way of our thinking and in a way of our being. So, and it's not just that because you're in the Western community you're more progressive. I guess that's the one word for that is progressive. It's not just about being progressive, it's just about that the Western society makes room for everybody to explore whatever it is that they are, whether it's their sexuality, their gender, their whatever that they want to identify themselves, or even dating across different race. I guess it makes more room for that. Yes, there are what's the word? There are obstacles. However, there's more room for freedom in that sense. So the reason why I'm saying women in the Western community, women of African and Caribbean descent in the Western community, is solely because of the places that we normally originate from. There's limitation in expressing that, and this doesn't necessarily include the African American women, because with a lot of civil rights movement and just freedom movements that went on in America, the Black American community, although there's still so much work to be done and so much progression to be made in the community, but they are a little bit advanced in a way of establishing different community within the Black community. And by that I'm a heterosexual woman, but I'm also a liberal. I don't have a label, but if you could describe me, you would describe me a liberal feminist who is an advocate, absolutely advocate for equal rights and choice and freedom of choice. So this is why I found this book liberating for Black women who are restricted based on culture and patriarchy, white supremacy. yeah, that. So that discrimination within our own culture. So we were marginalized in a broader in the broader culture, in the mainstream. We also women of certain sexuality or certain gender are also marginalized within the black community. So I think this is why I think it's so important for British and also Europe. I guess that's still a problematic also countries such as France, Sweden, the Netherlands, for black women who live there to be Belgium to be able to express. I work as a hairdresser here in Sydney, Australia, and I come across many backpackers, young women traveling Australia and having left their parents in whatever European countries they've come from, and they are different in in comparison to the social to the norm, to the leading section. They're different sexuality. They identify as different sexuality. They identify as different genders, or in between there somewhere. So I find this book very, very important for that, because we get to hear that. We get to hear a Nigerian mama, single mom, and I can just see her now because I come across those women all the time who are so cultural and so traditional in their ways of being, and gone to England to make a better life for themselves and breaking their back doing cleaning job to make sure that their children have a different future than them, and just the way that the author goes in and give that woman just a different type of identity to what is expected of her. Like it's incredible to see that, to explore that in a character of an African descent. Like, it's just unimaginative. Particularly, not to say that there isn't any lesbians or anything like that in the African community. There are, but in those described characters, absolutely not. And that might be me sounding a bit naive, but to hear it and to understand, to get to know this character and that side of it. And that's not necessarily her as a lesbian, just her as a, whether it's pansexual, bisexual, whatever. She wasn't a heterosexual female, and that freedom in the writing, in the creation of this character, I loved it. Thank you so much, Evaristo, because because this was so moving. Like, and I loved it merely because it gives people the freedom and the choice to be who they are. And women of African and Caribbean descent were all somewhere in between, were able to be free in between these pages and who they are, as well, with along with just the normal characteristics of a normal human being. Like, still confused about certain shit, still struggling with his career, still all of that stuff was in there too. And even prejudice that certain friends may have about them, and all of that is explored in this book, and it's fantastic. 450 something pages long, and I was holding on to the last 40 pages because I didn't want the stories to end. And it wasn't a continuing of just, it was going into different characters, and some of them linked and some of them didn't. It was every woman, almost every woman that I known in England through these pages. We have some appearances there of white characters, which I also liked. The addition to that, and the only thing that she didn't really include was maybe women black women, disabled black women, I guess. They weren't excluded per se, but they just weren't the characters in here. But otherwise, this is the definition of intersectionality. In between these pages, this book defines the intersectionality, intersectional black woman. I suggest you read it. It's so fantastic. It's so, listen, I've read a lot of Bernardine Evaristo's book, and she's very pushy. I mean, she's very, like very breaking the boundaries. But this has got to be my favorite novel. I want to say ever. Because of just the way that they went into the character. Maybe not ever, but it's there on top of my list. Thank you.